Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Good evening, Ken.
Good
Greetings.
evening. We're coming at you from the frozen tundra up north here on the frozen shores of Lake Erie, bringing the program to you tonight. We're going to talk about the spirit of Antichrist and how it applies today and how it applies from Bible prophecy. So if you would start us out, sir, we would appreciate it.
Okay, just a little bit of short humor here, as my engineer gets ready. Why did Noah punish? How did Noah punish and discipline the chickens on the ark? The answer. Why did he punish the chickens on the ark? The answer: because they used foul language. The next one. Now, the next one is just a few little short things here. The next one is, how do we know Peter was a rich fisherman? By his net income.
Oh my!
We're just throwing a few more. These are some of the best reasons why young people did not do their homework in history. One young man said, "Our furnace broke. It's been really cold. We had to burn my homework to keep our house from freezing." That makes a lot of sense around here.
You need a lot of homework around here.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of homework. Another one said, "Why didn't you turn your homework? My parents were sick and unable to do my homework last night. Don't worry, they've been suitably punished." And one last one. Here's one last one. Why you didn't turn your history homework? I spent the night at a rally supporting higher pay for our hard-working teachers.
There's a future politician for you.
But, we usually discuss world events if we think something significant has happened. And I was noticing that, they're working on this deal, I guess, by freezing positions in place. It really gives Russia much of eastern Ukraine, but it would, stop all the bloodletting and fighting. What was interesting is that neither Britain nor America were even involved. The Anglo-Saxon powers, which, run NATO and have been center of world politics for all my life, were not even involved. And then there was an article inside the Wall Street Journal about how Putin has cracked the Atlantic Alliance. However he did it, they got Britain sitting on the sidelines, totally uninvolved. Germany is leading the way, doing most of the negotiation with Russia, and they're being backed up by France. And it says here that Obama has agreed to outsource any American influence and negotiation to Angela Merkel of Germany. It's like America has agreed to no longer be a world leader.
Yeah. And another thing, Doug, sorry, I muted your mic because it was looping back through. That's why I did that. So you may have to switch to the headphones there. No, and another thing that happened this week was Germany has said they are not going to bail out Greece.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to, and that's causing some major influx in the euro. People are pulling money out, scared to death that they're going to lose it all if the euro takes a dive. So there's a lot went on this week.
Mm-hmm. And there is an article in here about that whole Greek thing, how it was falling apart. They have managed 4 hours ago to work up a deal with Greek's creditors to keep them from totally collapsing. But here's the but part. It's just temporary, just a couple of months. The creditors have come up with things. It shows that the economic solvency in Europe is still hanging by a thread. And Germany is no longer willing to just pay and pay to hold things together.
Yep. Yep. Something else happened. I think it was yesterday. It was in the news that the ISIS is on the. I mean, they're across the. Oh, I forget the peninsula there from Europe, and they're worried that they're going to come into Europe and start causing their mayhem in Europe. I mean, more so than they are, in force, in mass, kind of in a small invasion of southern Europe there.
And in spite of the naivete of our administration, which said that ISIS was in decline and defeat and retreat and falling back, it appears a set of concentric circles where ISIS operates inside, well, they're inside Libya, where they massacred 21 Egyptian Christians. And Libya, this is on the other side of Egypt from ISIS, and they're operating inside various other Islamic countries with their zealots, I guess the best way to put it. I'm not saying that the bombing isn't hurting them some, but it's not. We're not bombing all that much. I mean, America. I think Egypt picked up in the last couple of days on their own, and so did Jordan. But this ISIS thing it's just eating up the whole Middle East.
Mm-hmm. The article says they're planning to use, like you said, Libya as a gateway to Europe. They raise the possibility of storming southern Europe cities to cause pandemonium or closing international shipping lines in the Mediterranean Sea. So that's what they are purported to be planning to do.
And then we heard Italy only has 5,000 soldiers. For a country that big, that's like having no army at all.
Mm-hmm.
If ISIS were to get thousands of fighters in there, theoretically, they could cause all kind of chaos.
Which means someone in Europe has to come up and provide security for the whole of the EU, and guess who?
Mm-hmm.
Germany.
Kind of see the picture being painted, can't you?
Yeah.
Yep,
We
absolutely.
need you, Germany, or some variation like that. And then I want to add one more thing to all of this. The American naivete of the current administration, where well, two things. That one young lady, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but she looks like a Valley girl, and her geopolitical insight is Valley girl-like. She said, what we need to do is give them more opportunities to start businesses and jobs.
They won't be beheading people if they get a job at the Mickey D's. They'll be fine with that.
And the funny thing about that is, the more people, say, go to colleges in the Middle East and study the Quran, the more radicalized they become. Because the more they study it, they realize, wait, it really does say to behead infidels. And so it's for the most part, the leaders and the main people in the jihad holy war are upper class or wealthy Islamic citizens. It's not the poor. The truth is all the guys who came in for 9/11 had gone to grad school, and they were prosperous Arabs, mostly from Saudi Arabia. This idea that they're poor and starving, the facts are the exact opposite. I mean, they may use the poor people when they need to, but that's not what's driving it. It's not poverty.
Yeah, our administration's making Neville Chamberlain and his administration look like warmongers right now.
Mm.
Yeah, I think they're weaker than Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're making things worse. And one more thing that's naivete. Because that terrorist summit got them more criticism than credit, some people think they needed a PR victory, so they gave out the military details of our offensive against Mosul to take it back. And that is so dumb.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's okay to say we're going to launch an offensive against the enemy somewhere in Iraq. I can see, but give them the time and the where and what target you're going to hit. What kind of sense does that make?
It doesn't make any sense. Well, there was a general last night that said that was basically aiding and abetting the enemy by giving that information out.
Right. Right. You know, and that's something else you said, General. A lot of the heads of our military now have no experience. The head of the Navy has never piloted a dinghy. I mean, nothing. And the head of the Air Force has never flown a plane, never piloted a Cessna. They have no clue what they're doing.
Uh-uh.
But they're running the show.
Gee, that sounds like our government.
It is our government.
And by the way, to show you how dumb that is, one of the great breaks that the North got in the Civil War, because they were losing all those battles in Virginia and Maryland, was the if I get my details wrong, the principle is still the same. Second Battle of Antietam, some Confederate high-ranking person lost the battle plans. They slipped out of his pocket. The Union soldiers found them, so they prepared for the attack, and they still just barely won. But the point is, having the enemy's plans can make you can even have an inferior army and still win if you know when they're coming and how they're coming and where they're coming. Why would we publicize that? I still don't understand the stupidity. How naive are they?
Unless you want them to win. Unless you want them to do that, what else? What's other reason?
No, so that says that there's some thinking going on, and I just from all evidence there is absolutely no thinking going on whatsoever. I think they honestly believe that by saying that, they think that they will turn tail and run because, well, we're going to be overwhelmed. We must leave and run away. And I think they honestly believe that.
We're not exactly inciting fear in our enemies anymore.
Yeah, we've definitely lost the shock and awe that we started the first war.
Yeah, shock and awe. Yeah, that's gone, boy. They bomb like 7 strikes a day or 5 or 6 pinprick strikes. Well, I mean, that hurts them a little bit, but that's not going to, they're not carpet bombing like they did in shock and awe. I mean, you're going to really blow these guys away.
The only shock and awe that we get now is when they open their mouth. We're shocked and we're in awe. We're like, oh my gosh, what did you just say?
I mean, truthfully, people have known this for a while. They've made the statement that there is a truly disconnect from reality with the government right now, the leadership, because, I mean, when you come out and say that, well, if they all had jobs, that shows they have absolutely no understanding of anything that's going on. And it's the liberal type philosophy that makes people think, well, if you give this or you take care of this, that solves all the world's problems. Let's all hold hands, sit around the fire and sing Kumbaya, and the world's at peace.
And they say, well, it's just a perversion of, but actually the way they understand it, they're fighting the way they understand it. They're fighting for God and for the caliphate, for Islam, the caliphate, to rule the whole world. They're going to purify the planet of infidels by killing them, burning them, beheading them, or maybe forcing some to conversion out of fear. But and they don't understand that zealotry. They're not fighting for money. They think, well, it's just a job. That's
they've got a job. It's being Islamists. Yeah, they've got a job. Their job is to spread their religion and by any means necessary.
And by the way, they're making money selling organs of people they massacre, as well as selling oil and kidnapping people.
Yeah, that goes back to the story of the scorpion and the frog.
Mm-hmm.
All right, where do we want to get going on the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist?
Yes, I think we do. By the way, they're also so naive. They claim that right-wing conservatives and people who believe in the Bible are more dangerous than these Islamic radicals. And, I mean, what Bible radicals have been killing people in the last 5 or 6 years that you know of?
Yeah, where's all the videos of the missionaries beheading, poor Islamists, It's just,
I mean, it's totally outrageous. There may be one insane person every 5, 6, 7 years, does something with the Bible, but that's, that's about it. They're killing thousands of people, well, on a regular macabre basis. But our government is so naive. I guess they're so miseducated they believe their own naivete. Well, one of the things we were going to say, if you go to 1 John 2 and read verse 18 through 23, and you look at 1 John 2, one of the first things that becomes obvious is that John is saying that the Antichrist is already here. I'm going to read 2:18, but the whole context, 2:18 all the way to 23 is worth reading. John says, "Little children, these are the end times," and I think it means the times between Christ's first and second coming. "And as you've heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have arisen. By this we know that the final hours are come." And what I think context and history would back this up as well is that this was written in 90 A.D. This is the end of that first century, the end of the apostolic era of the church, and many false teachers had come, creating false Christianity, which eventually got bigger and outnumbered the true Christianity. I'm sure with a lot of help from the dark side, but it was starting even in 90 A.D. And what we think is that this apostasy at the very end time, right before Christ comes back, will put together one final Antichrist, or someone in place of Christ, who is going to deceive nearly the entire world. So the question is, if that perception is right, as it would appear to be right from all the scriptures, we haven't gotten to Daniel 7 yet, but we could bring that in later. But how many years do you all, if we're just speculating here, how many years do you think before we will see the man that is to be the Antichrist?
Oh, I don't know if I'd want to even guess, but
no idea.
The way I kind of gauge things is I look at where technology is going, and I kind of think in the back of my head, how far will God let this go before He puts a stop to it, and the way how far the world is sliding into a cesspool, and how long before He will shut that down. And that's kind of the gauge that I go by.
Well, if we look at all governments in the past, usually one of the very last things that goes before the great fall or whatever is the sexual perversion becomes totally rampant. And that has happened and is getting even deeper and deeper as we speak, with the gay marriage problems and all the other things that are connected. So with that being at the stage it is, the question now is, how long does it take for the rest of the world events to catch up? Germany doesn't have enough army to be one of the comparable kings. I mean, they sit around, drink beer, and guard defunct airports, basically, is all their army's capable of in the last several years. I don't see ISIS as being anything that is a threat from the south. So, we're talking, I'm going to step out and say 20 years before, 15 to 20 years before that can come about. So,
wow, 15 to 20. I'm not saying you're wrong. And I'm not saying you're wrong or right. It's hard to know. I was looking at the, if any of you have ever watched the movie Left Behind, actually we listened to the book on one of our trips, one of the first movies, and they picked a guy, his name is Carpathian. I'm not sure how they got that title, but Carpathian was a dictator from Europe, and he starts off as a kid in elementary school with the devil's help, terrorizing his elementary teachers, and then he goes up step by step, and one day he's at the UN. Next thing you know, anybody that opposes him, bad things happen to him. He eventually unites all of Europe and becomes, the Antichrist. I've always looked at it you know, Hitler took over Germany in 1932. I believe that's the year, 32. And because of the Versailles Treaty, Germany had a relatively small army, at least for that country. It was known for the big army, relatively small army. They were not allowed to have any submarines, warships, or heavy artillery, big heavy artillery, or airplanes. And within 4 years, you know, the Spanish Revolution, they had the best air force, at least on paper, in the world. And by 1938, they looked scary to the Europeans. And by 1939, what was that, 7 years? Yeah, 7 years. Within 7 years, World War II started. At least at the beginning, they had the best army and air force in the world. Now, the British had the best navy and some other things, but and that was 7 years. I'm mentioning that only to say, could it happen again in 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, they've already started the process, so it won't take them long, I don't think, to build up. I don't know if it even take them 7 years from this point.
I mean, depending on what happens around the world, I mean, if something big happens, it can cause people to be really motivated and get things done in a very short amount of time.
Right.
And so you could have something go from nothing to a whole lot in 2-3 years with production the way things is, or with production the way it is today.
Look how we ramped up in World War II. We ramped up from nothing to being the world leader, and we were making bombers every few minutes. The new bomber was coming off the line. It was unbelievable, and we ramped it up from nothing. So if you're motivated, you can get the job done quick.
But that's the exact problem that I see mostly in America. There is no motivation. This whole country as a whole are just so content to sit back and wait for someone else to do something. How long is it going to take? You know, we're going to have to raise a whole new generation of thinkers in this country. Basically, we've got a generation of sheeple now that just, you know. Yeah. So
you'd be surprised right now. No, Doug, you'd be surprised. The young people, I mean, the teenagers, and there's a fairly large percentage of them that are seeing what's going on and are figuring it out on their own. And I wouldn't be surprised that's in this country, but in Germany, where we're talking about where they'd have to ramp this up and get their army going, it's already started. Yeah. The movement has started there. They're sick and tired of what's happening to their country, to their culture, and they're about had it.
And if you look with what's happening around the country, I mean, you've got the threat of Russia. Nobody knows for sure what Putin's going to do. I mean, there's a lot of guesswork there. And then you've got the threat of Islam and the radicals. You know, Germany is kind of like coming up to the point where they're going like, you know, enough's enough. It's time we take steps to defend ourselves because nobody else is going to do it. America is sitting over there doing nothing. And so we need to take care of it. So it gives them the reason to ramp up. And there's not anybody going to say, now, Germany, you shouldn't be ramping up like that. They're actually probably going to be encouraged by the other countries around them because they're thinking, yeah, Germany, you go ahead and ramp up because you can help us because the U.S. is not coming over here to help us.
Right. And you're right, though, Doug. This country has a real problem. Anybody in their 30s, 40s, 50s, those generations, they are, you know, they're sitting back and they just want to be fat and happy mostly and, you know, don't want to make any waves. But the very young generation now, I talk to them, and you'd be surprised that they're starting to see some of this stuff. Not the ones they interview on TV and ask the questions, and they don't know who the first president was or what day it is.
You're not talking about the ones that want to give jobs to Muslims, right? I mean,
no, not them. That generation. No.
The word is word. But, you know, I was thinking about what you said, Doug. It's like, I'd say from 4 to 20 years, the big events could happen, you know, as short as 4 years, as long as 20. And I think some of it is a spiritual thing. Now, I don't have the answer even, but, you know, there's a scripture of Matthew where Christ lists some events, but he says, the gospel has to be preached to the world, and then the end comes. As if to say, a factor that we don't look at is also preaching the gospel to the world. Now, I know people will say, but that's the 2 witnesses. I say, yes, that's true. So I'm not denying any of that. And one of them will probably come out of the church, and one will come out of some famous position in the world, like like some examples like Moses and Aaron, and some other examples like Paul and others. But there's a spiritual component to the timing of it. That's what I'm saying. And maybe that's a hard thing to see. But isn't, like you were saying, I think it was Doug or Kelly, the spiritual component is also the decline of America, spiritually speaking, is a factor. God, how bad do we have to get before God says, that's enough, let's speed this thing up and get it over with? It's just something to look at. If you look at all the factors, we focus on the king of the north, led by Germany, the king of the south, some ISIL, but it could happen in three. ISIL right now probably is making most of their Islamic neighbors mad at them. But some deal could be cut in a few years, and you never know. Someone like the king of Saudi Arabia could make a deal and end up with it, or something. Any politics can be very treacherous. Just never know what's going to happen.
Well, the king of Jordan made a really big splash just, the last few weeks by taking on ISIL for burning one of his pilots. And it's amazing. And Ken touched on it, too, with technology as it is, internet and other things. A leader can come up in today's time in minutes. I mean, you just introduce him to the world by way of internet or whatnot. I mean, he's the hero of the American people now, and he's the king of another country.
Yeah, that's true. We don't have any heroes. It's like Obama is becoming the anti-hero.
Yeah.
And I almost feel sorry for Obama. I think he's been miseducated his whole life. And I think he's following his miseducation. And I know people get mad at you when you say that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
He's miseducated. He believes all that socialist America's the problem, anti-American, educational, politically correct mess that they teach in higher education these days. And his parent, and the tutor he had, and Bill Ayers, and the whole, all the people he's been around, Jeremiah Wright. I think that's what's wrong with America. We have too many people that think they know, but what they know is not right.
Yeah, they know better for everybody else.
In a way, I think
the liberal elites.
In a way, I think that it's and I don't want to get misquoted here or anything. I'm not saying that Obama is the Antichrist, but I think the attitude of the Antichrist is kind of the same thing. It's the Antichrist, because John talked about that they came out from within the church, so they were insiders that came out and used what they knew about the church to twist it and change it. And I think that that's what's going on in America. You have people who are Americans who don't really understand America, and they're the ones that are in the leadership roles today, and they're taking America and they're twisting what America has always stood for and turning it into basically anti-American. And, so I could see a parallel there where that kind of spirit where you come out of something and you take it and use it against itself to twist it into becoming completely anti what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying there, Kelly, leads right into the next the next line of topic was going on was the hatred. It says it was talking about hatred among brethren, but that begins with hatred among citizens in this country for the same reason you were just talking about. You have people that think they know what America stands for, but yet they're totally opposed to what we truly stand for, and it's just what's good is bad and what's bad is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, America's all divided, almost like we hate each other. Now, maybe that's a bit of an overstatement, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The left and the right, it's pretty bitter.
Mm-hmm.
It is, absolutely.
And
good segue, Doug. Yeah, that was our next topic, is getting into the hatred among the brethren and the symptom of the spirit of the Antichrist, of an Antichrist.
Well, as I was touching on there, and all of this goes back to the same concept of what Dr. Ricks was talking about. We have the Obamas and the Nancy Pelosi's of the United States government that are totally misleading the public and have no clue in their mind what they're even doing with the information they have. And that's the same thing that's happening within the church even. We have this leader and that leader, and we have wannabe leaders that no one is happy unless they are the one in charge. And it just seems to be that there's so many churches out there. You know, it goes back to, not to make light of it, but it goes back to the story about the guy that was rescued from a desert island, you know, and they pick him up, and he's got 3 little huts, and they ask him, what's the one hut? He said, well, that's my home. So, well, what's that hut on the hill? Well, that's my church. So, well, what's that other hut back over there? Oh, that was my other church. Nobody could get along.
Oh, that's good.
Sorry, Dr. Rick. Sorry, Dr. Rick. I know that's your job. But my point being that there's so much hatred in the church, even from people that were supposed to love each other, we're supposed to pray for each other, but because one church flies this flag or this name of a church, then there's, for some reason, we can't seem to want to combine as God's people over and above whatever name any church carries.
And you know, if you read First John 2:9-11, you know, John really makes it clear that the people that are, and this is right before his statement about the Antichrist, the people that are leaving, they're in darkness and hatred. And I have noticed that you'll have a little schism in a church group. Let's say the people that are on the wrong side of the schism, they soon get a spirit which says, we're going to destroy your group. As if that's the devil's goal, shouldn't be their goal. They should be saying, well, if we don't agree on something that's important enough to divide over, we're going to do something positive. And they shouldn't hate you. They should say, well, we're going to go off and do something positive. But instead, they're against you. That's their biggest thing. And when you see them at funerals and other places socially, there's a hatred, like, instead of saying, well, you know, okay, we had to part ways, but I try to hug them. I don't hate them. I may feel they're following some bad leadership, and there's a lot of bad leadership out there, or people who write books that are misleading, and you know, but I don't hate them, but they tend to respond back with hatred, and that is clearly, John said, a symptom of the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that hatred is, they don't even recognize that it's hatred. They believe it's sincerity in their beliefs, and so they would tell you they're not being hateful, that you're the one that's being hateful. And you know, there's where the rub is, because it's the same way with today when you have conservatives and liberals. Liberals are very sincere in what they believe. Conservatives are very sincere in what they believe. Yet when they're talking about each other, it comes across as hating one another. And you know, they can't get along, and so that's kind of the way that the churches have become with the splits and things. Is that, you know, if you belong to that group, that's that group. You don't want to associate with that other group over there. And you know, I agree with Dr. Riggs. You know, if you want to go off and you know, leave a church that you're attending and go in a different direction, then you know, by all means go do what you feel like you have to do. But don't try to destroy what you're leaving in the process. You know, I never have understood that. If you want to leave, you know, leave. If you want to come back, we'll be glad to have you come back. But don't try to tear the place apart on your way out. You know, just go. I mean, no hard feelings. If that's what you feel like you got to do, it's what you feel like you got to do. I respect that. But don't be trying to, you know, spread hate and vile to what's left behind because you've decided to leave. And so many people tend to try to do that.
Yeah, we had one. We had I loved him. I still do. He was a member of our church, but he just left. He got to a point when I've mentioned him before on the program, but he just got to a point where he thought he knew more. He studied himself out of the church, but instead of causing trouble, he had enough sense to just go, and that's what he did. And that's the way. If you get to that point and you think that you're going to be disruptive by trying to spread this new, you know, doctrine, or you know, this new view on how we should live our lives, then you know that that's going to be disruptive, just go. It's not your job to fix everybody. Just go off on your own and do what you think you need to do.
Yeah, I would argue that you can have some variations in doctrinal beliefs and still love and fellowship with everybody if you don't make it divisive. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to force people to make decisions. But often I find they find a wedge issue, at least the way they handle it. They make it divisive. We can be keeping the same Passover evening, but they say, well, but they have a different logic behind what the Jews are thinking or thought than what we do. And they'll divide the church over that, which it really isn't worth dividing over, but they will. And then I also found that, you can't build on a negative. In other words, instead of we're going to destroy your church, we're leaving and we're going to destroy it, instead of saying we're going to go off and build something positive. Because you can't build something positive on a negative. They shouldn't be happy about how much trouble they're causing us. Their focus should be on doing, if they feel God's called them to do that. And in most cases, God isn't calling them to do that. People end up arguing about what Christ will do after we're in the kingdom. Well, maybe it won't matter. We'll find out when we get there. It's not worth dividing the church over. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I remember many years ago that I was at a Bible study that Chris Cummings was doing, and I remember he said something that was just really hadn't hit me, and it just kind of opened my eyes to when you were dealing with other people and other groups and things. And he said, if two people who have God's Spirit disagree, then if they truly have God's Spirit, there's no reason to argue with each other or fight with each other or debate with each other, because you should both understand that if you both have God's Spirit, that the one that is wrong, God will lead that person to the truth and correct them because they have God's Spirit, and that's what God's Spirit does. So if I'm wrong and Doug and I disagree, then I don't need to be upset with Doug, because at some point in time, either God will correct me and I will see what Doug's saying, or God will correct Doug and Doug will see what I'm saying, and we will continue as brothers and not have any problem whatsoever. And if you truly believe that God's Spirit works the way God tells us it does, that should be how we all face disagreements within doctrine or issues within the church.
Yeah,
we don't have to be fighting.
God's truth is not hate. God's truth is love right down to the core and on all sides. And anyone, I think he tells us in the scriptures and makes it pretty plain. If you have hate in your heart, then you're not of mine. And that says it all.
Mm-hmm. If you looked at the Antichrist in a long run, as John says in the verses we mentioned, the Antichrist is in darkness and in hatred, and he's contrasting that to the Spirit of God, which is love. Eventually, the Antichrist, as they got bigger and stronger, what did they do? They used the power, the military power of the Roman Empire to physically harm the real Church of God and force them underground. That's what I mean by the spirit of the Antichrist is force and bullying, and that will come true in the end. If we were to go into the book of Revelation and the mark of the beast, in effect, what the beast is going to say in some shape or form, you're going to follow my system or else. We're going to cut you off and, you'll be in the black market for food and whatever else they can do to you. That's the spirit of the Antichrist.
Yes.
Well, the Antichrist is a constant challenge to everything we know and believe. It doesn't matter what doctrine you're trying to prove, reprove, or study, or work with. Satan and his Antichrist attitude is in there telling you the whole time, no, that's not right. And what was the first deception he did? He told Eve, "Thou shalt not surely die." That was the first. That's the way he's been with everything. So as God's people, we have to keep on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you go to 1 John 2:22, I'll just read it real quick. But the build-up to that also talks about love and worldliness and that kind of thing. He says, "Who is a liar but he that denies that Jesus is the Messiah? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and Son. And then I'll go to 1 John 4:3. And every spirit who doesn't confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God, and this is the spirit of the Antichrist. And it seems like the Antichrist, either Christ was not fully human or was not fully God, or both. But you have to believe in the real Jesus, who was fully God and then became fully human.
Yep.
Well, you know, the other warning he gives us, Dr. Ricks, is there in 1 John 2:18, where he tells, you know, we're to be as little children. And he tells them, little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard, that Antichrist shall come. Even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time.
Yep.
That's true. And it's probably going to get stronger. So if we were to ask the question, who will be the Antichrist, if we have, say, between 5 and 15 or 5 or 20 years before the final end and Christ comes back, that means the Antichrist has got to be probably at least 25 years old. Would that make sense? Probably more like 30
but
years
he's
old.
most likely alive, and he's most likely starting on his, on his move into some sort of power.
But the question is, who is he? And one thing that people like Mussolini and Hitler both came out of nowhere, I mean, politically. In a very short time, they gained fame and power. Mussolini, maybe don't know as much about him, but I think he was actually, Mussolini was a sniper in World War I, but wasn't all that famous or powerful. Just somehow, I don't know, his party of black shirts, one day they marched on Rome, and the government capitulated, gave him the power. I mean, maybe that's oversimplifying it, but in other words, it doesn't take years and years of going up the political ladder to get power necessarily.
Yeah.
I was watching a clip last night that just on History Channel. It was talking about Adolf Hitler and how he came into power. And when they were talking about him, I just found it interesting that one of the things they said is that the reason that Adolf Hitler was so popular with the people was that he was promising them everything they wanted.
Gee, where we heard that before?
Well, that was a funny thing. That was exactly what I thought when I heard that. I was like,
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
I mean, because that's and so when you realize that's how these people come into power is you take the people and you tell them you're going to give them everything their heart desires, and people want to believe that and buy into it.
Well, the state of the world when this person comes to power, we say he. It could be. It probably will, but doesn't mean it has to be a he. It could be a female. But when this person comes to power, the world's going to be in a rotten mess.
And people are going to be looking to have that
strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're going to be begging for a strong leader to dig them out of the mess that the world's going to be in. People are going to be starving. People are going to be at war. People are going to be. It's going to be a mess. They're just going to be begging for this person to come in and take over the beast, and so it's not going to be hard. They're just going to be up there. They're going to be the one that's convenient at the time, and it'll be the one. It'll be the beast. But people are going to ask for this.
Yeah, well,
he's not going to have to force his way in.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I look at is. I find it interesting sometimes how people, when they break down on different sides and things, and people who are more conservative in their beliefs, and some of the things they actually ask for or they're wanting actually opens the door to a lot of things that is foretold in prophecy about things that can happen because the leader we have now is very weak. People want a new, strong leader.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's somebody that has charisma, you're going to have people who are of a religious nature who are going to jump on his bandwagon and push him right along.
Yeah,
and think
I think the warning
is great and wonderful.
The warning for that is we are told that this person that comes along would fool even the elect, but for the elect's sake. So this person is going to be someone that could fool us.
Yes.
The people who are God's chosen. And if it fools us, the only thing that's going to get by us is some conservative, strong, someone who fits the bill that's not far left. It's going to be someone not like the current leadership, and people are going to fall for it, and they're going to think, oh, this is great. This guy's finally going to take things into his own hand, give him all the power he needs. He's the right guy. And so I have a T&O attitude. It's my state of mind when I deal with all these sort of leaders and all this stuff. It's trust no one. So I absolutely trust no one. I don't trust myself to know that the right guy's right. If the guy looks good, he's nah. Sorry, you look like exactly the kind of person we should put in that position. That means you're no good. Sorry.
Well, doesn't that make us think that maybe, and most probably that person that will come along will have somewhat of at least an appearance of a stable religious background and a stable godly appearing attitude. And just an example, like a Mike Huckabee. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that
Mike Huckabee's the man. No, all right.
No. But I know what you're saying. Plus, I think at the time we'll cut him some slack. A lot of people in the church will vote for people that are so far away from any kind of Christianity that, but they cut them slack because they fall in line here and they fall in line here and they like what they do here. That's what you're looking at.
Yeah. At least they have good enough. At least they have principles. And
they'll appear. Yeah, they'll appear to have some principles. Yeah, that'll be. That's why I say it. Trust no one.
One of the things I've always thought is that as America has been the stabilizer of the free world, from the far Pacific to Europe, as America withdraws and creates this big power vacuum, everyone's always assumed, well, at least especially liberals, America does too much. We meddle too much. That vacuum is not going to be replaced by a more magnanimous power like America. It's going to be replaced by pure evil, but the evil will be charismatic at first, and it'll be deceptive at first, and it will probably be, once people realize the dark side of it, it will be too late. They'll have too much power. When the guy goes to the temple, like in 2 Thessalonians and 3-11, and proclaims himself God, he must have a lot of charisma, and the media must be photoshopping him and making him. Don't you think people really want a superhero?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Some of the most popular movies right now are the comic book movies they've been making, the Marvel comic heroes, and also people do like that kind of thing. It makes them feel good that there's a hero out there that will stand up for justice and righteousness and save us all.
And I think at first, at least, that's how he will appear. I think people who really know the Bible and who are trying to obey it, we will realize probably at some point that this guy is real evil, but I think it'll be a long time before the world finds out. And then I think then it'll be the horrible mess as Babylon destroys itself in the end, and God destroys it. But I think for a while they're going to deceive the world. This guy may have 10 times the charisma of the people we're familiar with. I mean, politically speaking and religiously speaking.
And that's the time. I was just going to say that's the time that God's church is going to have to be on number one, awareness, and that we're going to have to drop any animosity or whatever you want to call it among the flags that are flown as to this group or that group. And we're going to have to work together to warn the world, because we're still going to be watchmen, and it's still going to be our job to point out God's word and God's law to the people.
Which I think that's what's going to bring on the persecution, is because just like we were talking about, the appearance, with the Antichrist, you have the appearance of hatred and darkness, but that will be put on God's people because we will be taking a stand against the spirit of the Antichrist, the false prophet. We'll be saying, hey, this guy that everybody loves, he's wrong, which will make us appear to be hateful. And that's what they'll use against us, saying, look at those people. Those people are hateful people. They're intolerant people. You know, they don't want to let two people marry who love each other just because they're the same sex. You know, they don't want to let the women go out in pregnancies that are not right, because, you know, so they're really hateful people. And so the very thing that is the Antichrist spirit will be laid upon God's people of having that spirit.
And that groundwork has already been laid.
In Daniel 7, and some other spots say that this man will change times and laws. Or at least he will try to. If God won't recognize it. He's going to change the calendar, probably change the Sabbath, and maybe certain moral things he will change. And that's why it's called the man of lawlessness, you know, Daniel 7 and the book of Revelation. That's a lot of power, but the world, for the most part, will buy it, except for us. And I think the Church of God is more important spiritually than we realize, because we're small as we are. You think, well, we're not even a squeak. They could care less about us. But I believe we're still more important than we think we are.
Yep. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to cover, James? Are we at the end of the program, gentlemen?
I think so.
Good place.
I think we're at the end. Let's see. What do we have for next week? Let me look at. Actually, I don't have the schedule with me. Have you got it with you, Ken?
Oh, it'll take a second, but I'll get it.
What's on for next week? Is it? It's one of those tougher topics. Is it liberty?
I don't know. What is next week? The end of what does liberty in Christ mean?
Yeah,
here we go.
That's a tougher subject. But what I mean by and I'm just going to try to define it a little bit. When people read books like Galatians and some in Hebrews, some other writings of Paul is fighting the Judaizing party because the way they administered God's law, as Christ said, they put a yoke of bondage on people. And Paul was saying we have liberty in Christ. Now others take that to mean you can do anything you want. All of God's laws are wrong. You don't have to obey. We can almost you can almost tell by that automatically has to be wrong. So we need to try to understand those scriptures about liberty in Christ, because I think that's a key to understanding the deeper things of the New Testament.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. All right. Well, we thank everyone for watching. We thank our viewers. We're glad to have you here. We really appreciate you coming in and joining us on your Sabbath, as cold as it is. And it is cold. So we'll see you all next week. I just want to say real quick before we sign off, happy birthday to Dan. It was his birthday this week. And if I can find the closing, we can go.
Good night, all.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me. I'm struggling today. That's the problem. Here we go.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it. And so glad you are here. And hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.
Stay warm, everybody, and good night.